I'd like to welcome everybody to the Subdivision Committee meeting of July 28th, 2022. I'm Porter Winston, and Joe Holcomb is our other commissioner here today. We have 6 items of business on the agenda. The second item of business is PPL 08, and it is being tabled, so that if you're here for that today, that item will not be heard or addressed at all. So the first item of business today is LSD 2022-06. It's a large-scale development submitted by Blue & Associates for properties located east of East Sain Street and North Front Street. Properties are zoned RPZD and contain approximately 10.55 acres. The request is for a 331-unit apartment complex with associated parking, and our planner is Jesse Masters. Ms. Masters, can we have the staff report?
Yes. You'll all have to bear with me today. I'm a little hoarse, so I'll project as best as I can. So the subject property before you today was tabled at the last subdivision committee meeting. We did have a different slate of commissioners here, so I will go through the whole project again just to make sure everybody's up to speed. So at the July 14th, 2022 subdivision committee meeting, the item was tabled in order to allow time for the applicant to address some outstanding issues regarding the planned zoning district requirements and the proposed planning area boundaries. There is a discrepancy between the approved planned zoning district that was approved by City Council back in early 2020 and the boundaries that the applicant was showing with their proposal. So staff recommended tabling the item because if the item is not meeting the underlying zoning district, it cannot be approved. So the subdivision committee recommended to table the item to give the applicant some additional time to consider what their options were. At this time, we did not receive any updated information from the applicant. There was no resubmission or intent to amend the planned zoning district or amend the project to meet those zoning district boundaries. We did, in the interim though, staff did supply some updated memos with some additional information from engineering, parks, and urban forestry, and we did receive some additional public comment in the interim that's also attached to your packet. Most of that public comment is in opposition to the project. So a little background on the project itself. It is in North Fayetteville. It is beyond the eastern dead end of Sain Street, south of Mud Creek, and it's along where the city is currently undertaking a Sain Street connection through the 2019 bond project. With that, we'll get into some of the details of the project. The applicant is requesting large-scale development approval of a 331-unit apartment complex with associated parking. They are requesting variance to floodplain standards as outlined in Chapter 168. We do have a member of the engineering division present to speak to this since it is something that falls under their purview. Staff is recommending denial of the applicant's variance request. The applicant is basically requesting a variance to show no increase in flood height, flood flow, and flood velocity. So the engineering staff is recommending denial of the variance. They do not feel they have enough information to support the request. As far as right-of-way to be dedicated, we're not recommending any additional right-of-way to be dedicated since a lot of that was acquired with the East Sain Street project connection itself. So we currently have, the city has what they need as far as the Sain Street frontage for the project. There is, however, a small portion of right-of-way in this location here that the applicant does intend to submit to a request to vacate that from the city council. We have not received yet an application for that from the applicant. As far as access management and connectivity go, the project is meeting those standards. It is proposed via driveways extending from the proposed East Sain Street roundabout to the north there, and then also here to the south through a drive. So the street improvements conversation is quite extensive, and we do have a pretty significant memo from the engineering division talking about some of those decisions. East Sain Street, again, is currently under construction as part of the City of Fayetteville's 2019 bond street improvement projects. Coordination between that project and the engineering division has been ongoing for a few years, and full details of that recent correspondence are included again in the memo that you can see. Given the added impact of this proposed development, staff is recommending an assessment of this project of $278,553.60 as a contribution to the proposed bridge over Mud Creek that's being constructed with this project, with the Sain Street project. Staff is also recommending that the applicant will construct a bus shelter at this location here. The city is planning on pouring the slab, but the applicant is expected to build the shelter that's associated with it. Staff is also recommending streetlights and street trees to be constructed per ordinance along the property's frontage along East Sain Street by the applicant. As far as design standards go for those elevations, we do find that the project is compliant with UDC 16623, those urban residential design standards. There's a minor discrepancy between a provided elevation for building C and D and what's shown on the civil plans, but the elevations are still meeting the ordinance, so we are comfortable moving forward knowing that that issue can be worked out. Pedestrian connectivity is also being provided throughout the site. All the ground floor dwelling units have pedestrian connections to the street, and all of the other requirements appear to be in place. They are meeting the building variation requirements, changes in roof forms, and they're providing architectural elements where needed. We also find that they are compliant with the architectural design standards as regulated by the Associated Plan Zoning District. Again, I apologize for my voice. As far as water and sewer, the applicant is proposing to extend 8-inch water mains through the development to accommodate fire protection and domestic service. The applicant will also be making an off-site connection to an existing 16-inch water main along North Front Street. The applicant proposes to extend an 8-inch sanitary sewer mains throughout the development as well. As far as Parkland Dedication goes, this is there's a little bit of nuance on this side as well. So the project was heard at the June 1st, 2020 Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting where 6.42 acres of land dedication was recommended for a 321-unit multifamily development. This was proposed for parcel 765.16852.000. So that was basically for over here in this area of the site. The number of units changed, and PRAB met again on July 5th of 2022 to reevaluate the request. PRAB is now recommending a combination of land dedication and fee in lieu for this project, 4.7 acres of dedication for 235 multifamily units and $91,392 for the remaining 96 units. PRAB also did identify 2 areas that would not be suitable for parkland dedication. The first is directly south of the project here. PRAB did not find that this area would be suitable due to the grade of that area. The other is a long, narrow utility corridor running north and south. Where there is still an issue is that the applicant's drawings are currently identifying some of the unsuitable area as proposed parkland, so there is still a bit of a conflict there as well, even with the reevaluation of acreage and fee in lieu. For tree preservation, there is a 25% canopy minimum requirement. There's a 63.9% existing canopy, and they are preserving 39.6% of the canopy. They will be required to mitigate with 41 2-inch caliper trees. So while there are still some outstanding issues, one of the major issues that has been identified is that the proposed planning areas as outlined in the approved plan zoning district, as you can see here, planning area 1 outlined in yellow, planning area 2 in green, and planning area 3 in blue. The applicant has changed those boundaries. So you can see here, planning area 1 in yellow, planning area 2 in green, and planning area 3 in blue. This is actually not a shift that can be done without City Council approval because it is set by the zoning district itself, and it's not something that can be administratively changed either by staff or the applicant. So it is actually on this basis that it was tabled at the last meeting because they are fundamentally not meeting their zoning district that was set by the plan zoning district. And then in the interim, we have not heard back from the applicant about their intent. Whether they intend to take it back to City Council to amend the PZD, which would be one option, or to redesign the site in accordance with the PCD. So having not heard back from the applicant at this time, we are actually recommending that the item be forwarded to the full planning commission with a recommendation of denial because they're not meeting their zoning. And now the reason that we are recommending that the full planning commission deny the project rather than this body is that there is not actually an appeal process if the subdivision committee were to deny the project as outlined in our code. So it would have to be denied by the full planning commission in order for the applicant to have the opportunity to appeal that decision. So we have received inquiries in opposition to the project as well from members of the public. Members of the community that are opposed to the project have issued concerns about development within the floodplain, impacts to the natural environment, impacts to traffic along College Avenue, and concerns about a planned trail connection through the property's southern strip. And we did include some of that written public comment too in the report. So with that, again, we are recommending essentially denial of the project, but it would have to be done by the full planning commission. I'm happy to answer any additional questions you might have. We do have members of, from engineering, urban forestry, and parks here to answer any questions as well.
Great. Let's turn to engineering first. Josh, you there?
I am. Good morning.
Let's have your comments.
Memo pulled up really quick, so I think I'm just going to touch on a couple items as far as street improvements and flood studies and the variances that are being requested. So with the floodplain development and the ordinance that the city council passed last year, we typically require a flood study to show no increase in flood flows, flood velocities, or flood heights anytime fill is being placed within the floodplain. To do that, you have to have a flood study to figure out what sort of impact is being generated. And so the variance that the applicant is requesting is to not do that flood study. We have been in contact with the developer, and they did mention via email that they are going to do a flood study. However, we haven't seen it, haven't heard anything after that email, which was a couple weeks ago. So that was the first floodplain variance. The other one is to not have a building above the base flood elevation by 2 feet. That's just for added protection. Also, it impacts the city's community rating system through FEMA and the flood insurance program that the government has. And so, depending on the amount of points that a city has, it relates to the amount of cost a person has to pay for flood insurance. And so, with any sort of variance to that floodplain development, there's some specific, I guess, consequences or things that can happen. And so that's why I included in my memo basically the outline of what can be considered for a floodplain variance and what needs to be included if that's approved. And so both of those we're not comfortable recommending approval of. When we get the flood study and the fill development shows no increase in those three items, it's something we might be able to support, but right now we don't have that information. And then as far as that 2 feet above the base flood elevation, that's something that we won't support. With Same Street, there's a bit of history going back at least 2 years since the first was proposed by the developer. I'm not going to go through all of that. I included kind of an outline of a rough timeline of significant events, emails, correspondence, and so that's in the memo. And generally, staff feels like we've been pretty accommodating to the developer, getting information to them in a timely manner, helping them as far as subbing out infrastructure, sewer pipes, realigning roundabouts, talking with the university to obtain a right-of-way for the Southern Drive. So we feel like we've done all that we can to help the applicant move forward. We're just looking for some more information as far as that flood study and those variances. For drainage, I told Subdivision Committee last time that they are required to meet the 4 minimum standards: water quality, channel protection, and peak flow mitigation. With it being so close to the floodplain and floodway, the applicant did do a model of Mud Creek, which if detention is provided on site, it actually increases the peak flow for the overall basin. The time of concentration is kind of aligned with that detention pond, and so engineering is waiving the peak flow mitigation, but we are still requiring water quality. And I mentioned that we might need some more information on the channel protection line. So there's a lot of nuance to this project, a lot of background, and a few items as far as the technical side with engineering, but we do support planning's recommendation, and I'm available for any questions.
Josh, you just mentioned about can you go over the thing about the peak flow again that you're not requiring?
So looking at the basin, the development basin, so where the project is, it's kind of at the bottom of an overall basin that includes area above upstream of the project, and its steady point at the property line. So with detention, you're holding back that water and releasing it over a period of time. Sometimes when you're close to a river or creek, if you hold that back long enough, it aligns with the overall larger basin for that entire river. And so you've got a higher peak flow from your detention pond that would have been let out fairly quickly, just run through pipes into the creek, but you're holding that back to the overall basin's peak flow. And so it's kind of, if you imagine pouring 2 cups of water out, one's coming out really slow, and then you start dumping it over, and then you take the other one and dump it really quickly. You get rid of the water faster if the one that you dump over quickly. So let me know if that made sense, or if I need to work on my analogies.
Just keep working on it. Then the other question was, has the applicant given you any indication about that they're actively pursuing the flood study issue?
So I got an email from the developer. I can check real quick. And that might be a good question for the applicant representative if they've done any work or have made any progress. But the email that I got was from July 15th.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Let's move on to urban forestry. Who we have for that? Melissa.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. So urban forestry concurs with planning's recommendation. One of the biggest issues with us is the planning areas and how they were, approved for the PCD at City Council and how they're currently being presented. That blue planning area is the tree preservation area. And so we're curious to know if the Parkland Dedication and tree preservation areas will be resolved, with that approved PCD and how they'll move forward with that. Also, since this project is a PCD, tree preservation easements will be required, and they have to be separate from the Parkland Dedication, and I believe that is their intent as they've shown on the plans. They are over their 25% of minimum required tree preservation at 39.6%. There is a trail that they are proposing to run through that long sort of skinny piece of property that heads towards the south. That area could be taken out of tree preservation easement entirely, so that if that trail's built later, they don't have to go to city council to try to amend that tree preservation easement because, hard paved trails are not allowed in those areas. So that would require changes. If they took that area out of their tree preservation easement calculations, they'd still be around 30%, I believe. So they'd still be over their minimum requirement for tree preservation. And it still could be a tree preservation area, but just not in a formal easement. Those are the main comments that we have regarding this project. And let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Sorry. I hope everybody turned their phones off. Melissa, there's a couple of blue areas. And are they, there's one, that diamond-shaped one up to the north. Are those all separate tree preservation areas?
Yes, that's correct. So they've got a couple of different areas on site. And again, the requirement is 25%, so that's what would be expected for tree preservation easement. Anything above and beyond that, of course, urban forestry would be fine with those areas going into easement, but it's not required to. So I'm glad that they are over under tree preservation, especially with the possibility of the trail running, to the south through one of those areas.
And the green area that's I think is Parks Dedication, is that part of their tree preservation area as well?
So that's separate. They have calculated that out separately,
Okay.
which it has to be. They can't overlap or count for the same thing.
Excellent. Joe, did you have any questions for her while she's up here?
No.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Let's go on to Parks and Rec Board.
Sit here.
Hi, in person.
In person, yes, sir. I'm Zach Foster, park planner, and so, Parks staff is following Park Advisory Board's recommendation of the combination of fee in lieu and land dedication for the reasons mentioned earlier. And so to follow up what Melissa was saying on the crossover tree preservation, Parkland dedication, the areas that were shown are different than what PRAB originally reviewed. And so when Parks Board went and made their recommendation again in July, it was just to kind of really solidify what Parks Board finds and Park staff finds as suitable parkland. So any questions on that, I'm happy to answer. The trail that's being mentioned that residents are posing questions to is we're planning on that if it were to happen. It's been on the master trail plan for a while. Matt Mihailovich would be the best person to say when and how long it's been on there, but that has been. And so once this project first came up and we were able to speak with the developer, it's always been in mind that this would be a great opportunity to connect some disconnected neighborhoods to the trail for the Mud Creek Trail corridor. We could extend it. It's largely wetlands, so it'd be mostly conservation, low impact. But we all Parks staff always saw that land originally approved by PRAB as a significant piece of land to be maintained and supported by the Mud Creek Trail corridor. So and so the trail that is being proposed north and south will have to be separate from tree preservation, but some of the residents have posed questions. It'll likely be on the west side of that that's a draw that runs through there, and Parks and Trails staff is very adamant about preserving our environment and nature and making sure that we make as little impact as possible. It's for the most benefit as possible as well, just like the rest of the city for sure. So yes, any other questions about that?
And you can confirm that we're talking about a soft trail.
I believe this will be a hard surface trail. There won't be lighting though, so I can't confirm exactly. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, and so I'll have to get back with you on that. But it will be a connector trail that gets to the hard surface Mud Creek Trail corridor. So,
and then the parks area that's to the east end of this property. Major concerns that people brought up in the past were that this park was sort of an island, disconnected from and really only accessible through this property. And the concern was that it could become, it could be used in ways that the Parks Department would not prefer a piece of land to be used. Can you speak to that and reassure people that live nearby there that we're not building a problem?
I can do my best. So the city already owns land contiguous to this, and so really the land that would be developed, or actually just connected by a trail and also this development, would likely receive the same amount of use whether the parks owned it or not. And so the amount of development that would happen, really the purpose of a trail is to help with passive transportation, or I guess active transportation, whichever way you want to look at it. Being able to get around our city and really connect this neighborhood that at current standing, they need to go all the way out to a major road and then go north and then west on the Mud Creek Trail if they were trying to get west. Whereas this would allow them to connect a lot easier. That's kind of the goal of the Master Trail Plan, is to make those connections happen. So I don't perceive that being really whether the park owns that Parks Department or the city owns that land or not. If this development were to go in, I don't know that really the use would be, if anything, there would be more people in the area with eyes on it with this development being here. And so the developer did respond to our request to make a connection into the east side of their development where it ends off. When this was first proposed, there was a whole parking lot they were going to dedicate just for the Mud Creek Trail corridor right there as well. So and all eyes on parks does increase safety and just kind of that's just something that we've studied in the past. But I hope that answers.
I think so. One other question about that park is this a park that you can pass through to keep going on a trail?
Yes.
Or is this a park that is like an out and back kind of thing?
No, sir. So this right here, this really you can call it a park. It'll largely be undeveloped just because of its flood presence that's in there. And the reason Parks is interested in a park that has a high flood presence is because we already own land around that for the trail corridor. So if there are, it's not common for parks to just run floodland, right? But this makes sense in the fact that it's already contiguous to other parkland that we already own, and that if we needed to make other trail expansions or opportunities, then we would have to go through private ownership, things like that. So whenever this comes through, the way that we have it shown on the plan right now, and we're talking with the developer, is this will actually go and connect to East Sain Street, and which goes directly into the large Mud Creek Trail corridor. So at the moment, the way this plan is shown, the trail that goes north and south through this blue corridor right here just goes into the west side of the development and then straight into the trail corridor. So it doesn't have like a path or bike parking or as it currently sits to go into that proposed Parkland dedication land.
Okay.
So, but Parks, to kind of recap, like the Parks Board was their biggest concern was to not accept the land just south of the development because of the steep slope, because of the little park development you could have there, or even support, but other reasons among that. But it's kind of the large issue with there.
There was a reevaluation of dedication and money in lieu.
Yes, sir.
Was that because they added units or rooms to the?
Yeah, so it was actually both. It was two things. One of them, yes, they added units, and so whenever you add units, your ratio changes for how much needs to be dedicated or how many fees need to be paid. But also, what had happened was whenever the project was originally presented, the amount of land that they originally said to dedicate, and then was only for a dedication only. The Parks Advisory Board recommended to only do land dedication. And so since this project now has gone over the amount of units that their land dedication shows, I have the exact numbers, but really it's the amount of land that they have shown to dedicate is fewer than they can actually provide. And included in that amount of land is land that the Parks Board and Park staff does not recommend as suitable parkland. So the Parks Board went back to revise their decision, say we would still love to take this suitable parkland. And part of that parkland can be excess urban forestry land that the Parks Board in their minutes identified that really that northeastern side of that, like not down the strip, but kind of in that area. If there was area there that they wanted to shave off of urban forestry and provide as parkland dedication, Parks Board was in favor of that. But the reason that they had to change their decision was because the original decision was only for dedication, and so they needed to go back and on the record make it a combination of dedication and fee in lieu.
Gotcha.
And that was kind of the source of that.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Joe, do you have any questions? Very good. So before we get to the applicant, just so that the applicant can answer questions, I want to open this up to public comment. Is there anybody here to speak to this item? Just if you want to stand up, I think we can hear you from there.
I'm Brenda Wallner with, I live at 3582 North Buckingham Road. I'm a little concerned about the conflicting information, first of all, we're getting about the trail. Our last meeting, and I know that you didn't have representation at the last meeting, but they said that it would not be a hard surface, that it would just be soft surfaces, you know, wouldn't be finished. And that is a very, very big concern for the residents. It's a flooding area already, their backyards already tend to flood. Plus, you know, when you put a hard surface in there, that definitely affects the nature of your wildlife, you know, everything, it affects everything. So I'm kind of confused why we keep getting different information, and every time we hear it, it's different.
Yeah. So and again, so that department is with Matt Mihailovich. So I'm not positive on. Yeah, I can't say for sure whether that is hard surface or soft. I know that the large Mud Creek Trail corridor that is existing is hard surface because of the amount of volume it gets. But I do know that this trail that is being proposed with the development will not be lit. That's the biggest thing. But I don't have the answer on if it is hard surface or soft surface. So that would be something.
Can you connect her with Matt?
I'd love to, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And another question is, if it's for public access and it's not lit, then that becomes very dangerous for, you know, and a liability for the city. Plus, it becomes dangerous for the homeowners to have people wandering back and forth where you can't visualize them and see them. And if you go into their area, their backyards, it's pretty close proximity. And so they will be walking along, and most of those houses aren't fenced. So, you know, you get a lot of concern about who's coming and going, and if it's gonna be city property, you need to light it, as far as I'm concerned. A couple of other things that I don't understand, I think that need to be addressed is, since they've increased the apartment quantities, count, whatever you wanna say, then that increases your traffic flow. And in the very beginning, we did a traffic study. There's never been a traffic study done on this, which I don't understand why they would say, oh, we'll do a traffic study after we approve all of this rather than before. I met with the police commissioner between, I guess it would be Harold and, well, right at Whole Foods and past to, you know, where Panera is, all that. That is the highest, where more traffic accidents are done in the city they've told me, they've given me all the numbers. They said that is our number one. So now we're increasing, we thought we were increasing it by 200, I think, units, which inevitably would be, for 200 units, you're looking at least 400 cars or 400 in and outs in a day. That's what they give you. And so if you're increasing it to 300, you're looking at 600 more cars and more stuff. So I really feel like that we need to address that situation again. And we need to have a traffic study done before we approve any of this. Because we agreed, or when we were talking with the developer, they agreed, first of all, now to donate all this land, and now we're finding out that, okay, they're backing off those numbers, and they're not donating as much as they said they were. Am I understanding that correctly?
The development just changed in size, and so when
Yeah.
that's very common.
Well, but we were told one thing,
Yeah.
and now we're being told a different thing. And we were not told anything about the north and south area, which we're very opposed to. And the other thing is, why are they allowed, I mean, I guess they meet the criteria of the zonings, because beforehand they didn't. They had to use all 3 of those parcels to get the numbers per quota. And I think if you look at it, I'm not certain, but with the numbers that they've allocated now, with the 300 apartments or whatever it is, I think they might be over their numbers.
Are you talking about tree preservation?
No, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around. I'm talking about, there's a and I don't know what it's called, but you can only have so many apartments per certain parcel.
Okay.
And I
see.
think that they are over their numbers now. I may be misspoken, but I think they might be over their numbers now that they're shoving 300 into this one area. And I would like that addressed as well.
Very good.
And I know you're recommending denying it, but I think those things need to be addressed before, and I think we're denying it because, or y'all are recommending denying it so they can go back and appeal their zoning process, if I'm understanding that
I
correctly.
think it has more to do with the floodplain issues.
Okay, well, I think we need to be looking at that, because of course, the more people you bring in, the higher amount of pollution, the higher amount of, everything increases. And so I really feel like we need to address some of these issues before we even move forward. And I know you're denying it, but I don't want it just to go to an appeal process. I think we really need to take another dig into this, because what we were told a year and a half ago and what we made, we were promised certain things if we would back this project, and now those things are being, they're changing.
Okay.
And we weren't afforded the opportunity, and I will be talking with the developer, definitely, but I think those things need to be addressed.
Well, we'll get you in touch with Matt Mihailovich, and Jesse, did you respond to the questions about redoing a traffic study when you add some units to the project?
Sure, well, I can address, excuse me, I'm very sorry.
Would you like a
I may take you up on that actually, but so I did want to just first address, so the planning staff is recommending denial of the project due to the fact that they have changed their planning area boundaries that were set by the planned zoning district, so they can't administratively do that. That's something that would require staff, it would require a staff recommendation, a planning commission recommendation, and a city council decision on. So that is the main reason why we're recommending denial of the project. It is not on the floodplain issues, that's a separate issue. I did also just want to address that they are still meeting, even though they've added 10 units to what was approved by the PCD, they are still meeting their overarching density requirements for the PCD, so they are still within their allowable density.
And we're talking about they have added 10 units?
They added 10 units, yeah,
Okay.
so the PCD was approved for 321 and they're now at 331.
Gotcha.
As far as the traffic study, I'll probably defer that question to Josh Boccaccio, because it's our engineering division who reviews this.
Josh, are you there? Can you address the question of adding 10 units and rejiggering a traffic study?
Yeah, that's something that we've asked for previously. Haven't seen an updated number on that. It's not likely that the results of that traffic study are gonna change. Just upping by the amount of units that are being added to the development. I did want to kind of point out that the city does have some improvements going on in that area, obviously Sane Street, but then also north-south connection between Sane and Millsap, Hemlock Avenue, and we also are going to be working on the College Millsap intersection. So there's a few items that the city's doing to help alleviate traffic in that area, because we do know that it's a problem right now. Like I said, we're working on that and have those things in design. So as far as that traffic study, it's something we've asked for, namely to get an updated generation number for the Sane Street Bridge assessment. So the way that I did that previously, calculated it, there's certain numbers that the ITE Institute of Traffic Engineers published for trip generations for multifamily schools, single-family residences, things like that. And so I took the units that they're proposing and then used that number to get the number for how many trips are going to be generated for that assessment. So like I said, we have asked for that updated traffic study and have not seen it yet.
Very good. Thanks, Josh. I think that's about as much as we could squeeze out answers-wise on what you've got today.
Can we get a copy of this memo that y'all are looking at, so we have it for, I don't know where you can.
Is that something
It
that,
is available online. If you go to the main city's website and find the agenda for this meeting, you can find the whole packet.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
excellent. Is there anybody else from the public speaks this item? Can we get your name and address too?
My name is Robert Knockman. I'm here with my wife Lauren. Our address is 3457 North Belshire Drive. First, I'd just like to concur with everything that Ms. Molnar has discussed. I'm a little bit concerned about the discussion of parks and recreation. First, I've been searching park and recreation, transportation, anything on your website. I see no mention anywhere of an interest in this trail that's running from north to south. I've seen nothing that suggests who has ever requested this from the public, that they would require additional access versus the access that all of us in that region have to the Mud Creek Trail and the rest of the trail systems. I guess I also don't understand, who is it that this will provide additional access to? What's the cost benefit analysis of that in terms of the scale of the number of people that are actually involved? I wonder if anyone in this room has ever walked this proposed trail. Anyone from Parks and Recreation, to see where it is out, supposed to be dead ending, and where it's potentially going to begin. That's more difficult, I guess, to assess. So I guess my question is, if this had been an interest of Parks and Recreation in the past, it's certainly not on their planning scheme till what year? I think there's 2027, I believe, is the planning of construction that is in process. Nor is there any discussion, I think, in the website that describes, but we also have these other grand ideas regarding improvement of the trail system. So it's a bit confusing. It seems to me that this popped up, and I think the gentleman that was here last week, and we've had other communications from the developer that said, gee, would you like this simply removed?
I think
So it seems to be, we don't understand the interest other than the statements that have been made this morning.
the city's website is, they do their best with it, but it is hard to use, it's hard to
Very hard to
navigate.
use.
And there's a lot there that is hard to find, but it is there. Would it be helpful for you to also talk with Matt Mihailovich to get some more information on how to navigate, find the things that you're looking for, or find out whether they're there or not?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
So,
Mr. Chair.
if you can,
If I may, I can pull up the active transportation plan to
Okay.
show it if that's helpful.
if we have access
I
to
did
it.
ask Transportation, and I had a reply from them that they're still in development of a master plan, which I think was initiated at the beginning of the year, this year. And they're still conducting surveys, not surveys, from the general public regarding interest in developments of a range of things, certainly parks and trails.
Okay. I think most of your questions are, can be, that Matt Mihailovich can help get a lot of information for you, and talking with him directly is probably the easiest way to do that. Is there anybody else from the public?
I have a question for Parks. So is this the end of the trail going to dump right by Summerhill Racket Club?
I am not, I'm not sure.
Well, the end of that trail is not gonna, it's gonna go to a residential street. There's gonna be no parking there for anybody to access the trail from that end.
So one of the ways to access this trail, and you can kind of see on the television right here, there's another one right to your right as well, that has been proposed, and that blue line starts next to, I believe it's is it the Racket Club? There's a church over there too, I believe. And on that south end where Jesse's mouse pointer is, and that'll actually extend all the way north to where that new street connection will be. Right in that area. And that's how that connector will happen.
But that southern tip has no parking at it.
And so it's
People will park at the racket club where they're not allowed, but you gotta park in front of somebody's house to access the trail. It's a dead end.
right, and so this is part of the active transportation plan, which Parks helps and support, facilitate, but is largely run by the Transportation Department, and Matt Mihailovich is the best person to speak to about logistics and how this decision was come to be. And so whenever this first came, like my role is in Parkland Dedication, accepting Parkland, understanding suitability for parks. And then once this came up, the first thing I did was call Matt and get the idea of what the active transportation plan, how that has to do with, how it interacts with this project. So again, I can't speak directly to the idea behind this, the proposal, but you know, it's.
It would be helpful to meet him there because I think he would clearly see it's a dead end.
Yeah, well, we'd be happy to handle.
Yeah, I can't guarantee Matt a site visit, but he does get out.
I have to discuss with Matt, and Matt could not provide any clarity as to this.
Okay, well, maybe things have gotten more clear since then. We're sort of limited on what we can figure out here today in parks and stuff with this committee. Is there anybody else from the?
Question.
Yes.
That blue trail up there is what is that the proposal, that little underneath D?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, that's the
Is the
proposal.
top of it Summer Hill Racket Club?
The bottom.
Bottom.
So it's not actually going to Stubblefield, this trail?
No.
So that connection where you see that blue line end will continue north, and then that goes into where the Mud Creek property will be, and that eventually connects into the new road that will be in.
Excuse me,
That's
the
proposal.
blue part goes into, that's between those two houses, the one at the far north? No, where the blue
See
is.
the blue line as it turns
Yeah.
to the right?
That is going in between two
Two
homes.
homes.
So one thing to understand about these blue lines is that they're just proposals that are in there and that have been thought to be, these would be good future things to pursue. And so it's impossible to speak to every single resident owner, because we have blue lines across the entire city map. If you go to our GIS, you can see
Well, that's
the
reassuring.
future plan. And so what happens is we have an idea, and then should an opportunity arise where we're able to accept land, like for example along Owl Creek is a great example of that, where we've received land, and we already had a blue line there. It's like, this is actually great because we thought this would be a great idea in the future. And so none of this is definitive. All of this is, of course, up for discussion, and we want to be able to provide benefit for, of course, the residents that live in those neighborhoods, but also the city at large. And so this is why these meetings are so important, to have these discussions happen.
So can there be discussion and decisions made prior to? Because I know that where that blue line goes into, there would be heavy opposition.
At the current proposal, that blue line that you're most recently talking about that goes between the two houses is not on the plan. Because there's tree preservation separating where, I'd be happy to show this to you as well, where this is where the trail is proposed. It's on the west side of this skinny piece by the racket club, and it would run on the west side of that draw and then connect into the mud. This is all proposal, sure, but there is not one right here. One of the reasons is for the high expense that would be to bridge that gap as well, because that is a very steep area. So, but all of these are, of course, are just proposals. And so what we have now is just, if the opportunity were to arise to put a trail there, Parks would already have the ownership of the land. And that's one of the I guess, things that we're just trying to be future planning for.
So the city owns between those two houses.
Not at the moment. No, we don't own any of that. That's at the moment. Our property is along the Mud Creek. So the property.
If I may jump in, between those two houses is city right of way.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
That does grant city access, franchise utilities to be in that area.
Thanks, Josh.
Okay. Yeah, we're getting a little bit too in the weeds on the parks thing. I'd like to try to bring this back to what this body can work with, and if you all can get together with the trails coordinator, Matt Mihailovich, and get your questions and answers. I just don't have these answers here for the most part. Is there anything else that has,
Just want
that
to
we
ask
need to?
one question about
Sure.
this little skinny line. What is that?
That is, I believe that's a utility corridor, if someone else could.
I can weigh in on that. So that is the piece of land that is owned by this development. They are currently calling it out as tree preservation, but that's a parcel line. So they're calling that out as tree they own that long skinny piece. And right now they are indicating that as to be preserved for trees.
It's preserved for what?
Tree preservation?
For trees.
That doesn't mean a trail.
No,
So because before,
the trail,
there was discussion about this trail would come out at Stubblefield, and there would be parking, which we know is not possible. And so we just are confused. So it's not gonna go through our backyards by Stubblefield.
currently this long skinny stretch is called out as tree preservation.
Right, that long skinny piece, I'm sorry if I misspoke. The long skinny piece was never intended to be as a trail. One, because of the width of it, two, because it is so tight, and there is utility corridor through there. Anything involving a trail that was proposed was off of that transportation plan, and it was always shown as a proposal where that current line is, which is next to the racket club, I believe, ma'am, is that right? So, yes.
So the words that were spoken, I guess at the last meeting, were incorrect. It is not coming out of Stubblefield.
I can't verify, I wasn't at the last meeting.
But it's not coming out of Stubblefield.
This portion of the site is called out as tree preservation.
Okay.
So that's,
a process.
is this about trails still?
Not so much about trails, we moved there about 4 years ago. I'm trying to get understanding of the process.
Okay.
This project has apparently at least two sets of interests. The development of the residential area, and then there's tag along, which is seemingly the interest primarily of Parks and Recreation for that trail extension. How do we address these things going forward? What is our process, and how are we getting people informed of this package, if you will, as to what are Parks and Recreation's interest, what are transportation's interest versus what is the development's interest?
Yeah. Jessica, can you address that? It is difficult for the public to navigate this.
Sure, so I think the
whole
first step is
process.
attending meetings like this today. Right now we have a development that's being proposed by a private property owner to develop some multifamily as part of that development. The city is proposing some infrastructure improvements that are in line with that development as part of this original PZD package that was approved by City Council. Making an appropriate trail connection was part of that discussion. Setting aside land for tree preservation was part of that discussion and part of the requirements, and setting aside land for parks was part of that discussion, part of that requirement. So I think to answer your question, I think you are part of the process by attending the meeting today. And
then you can also contact the departments themselves by email or phone, and that's the best way right now. And just get your questions out there to them directly. The city's very responsive. I couldn't tell you how responsive the developer is, but the city is very responsive to questions.
What meeting would we go to next if this is going to planning?
So the next meeting, the subdivision committee still has to vote today, and we still have to hear from the applicant as well.
Yes.
But the subdivision committee, should it be forwarded to the planning commission, the next planning commission meeting is on August 8th.
August 8th. Very good. Okay, I want to close public comment and bring this back to hearing from the applicant. Is the applicant here today or online? Do we have anybody?
We do not have anybody present online.
Okay, well then we'll bring it back to,
We have a Cody Sexton has raised his hand.
okay. Cody, you there?
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Cody Sexton with Blue Associates, and here on the applicant's behalf. And I apologize, I'm not intimately familiar with this project. I'm just kind of filling in at the moment, but I'm sure that it would be the applicant's desire, if it would be possible, to be able to table the project or table it to give the applicant more time to bring more information to the committee rather than full denial. I'm not entirely certain what the process is here.
Okay. Do you have any information on the flood study that's changing, that's in process?
I do not at the moment, no.
All right. Is there any other parts of this that you want to speak to?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Cody. We'll bring this back to the commission. So the question is table here or deny and forward.
Sure. So staff recommends that you forward the project to the planning commission for full denial.
Okay.
If you table it here, it would have to, that would be the best procedural due process option, since that would give, that would give the full planning commission the ability to view it and make that final decision, and give the applicant, should they choose to, a due process right to appeal. And then that would give the members of the public a track, and they would understand what meeting to attend next, should there be another one.
Good. Yeah, I think this has been kicked around Subdivision Committee for quite a long time.
That is why staff is recommending it get forward to the full planning commission to get a final decision on it.
I agree with that. Okay. Did you have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, my only comment would be just to decide, I think, if we want to go ahead and let them, if we were to consider tabling, maybe that'd be a commission question instead of doing it here at this point, since it's already been pushed around.
That's what I think too.
Yeah.
If we want to do it then. So let's make a motion that's probably at the top here, so we can get on to other things. Number 3. Yes, is it?
I'll make a motion to forward to the full planning commission with a recommendation of denial. That's my motion.
Excellent. I'll second that motion. You concur?
Yes.
Excellent. So we have a motion from Commissioner Brinkman, whom I did not know was in attendance.
Filling in for Mary.
And a second from Commissioner Winston, and we are done. Thank you all for attending. The next meeting, come to Planning Commission, and hopefully most of your questions will have been answered already.
August 8th will be the planning commission meeting. August 8th.
I forget that there's that button over there that shows the rest of the people, so could be someone visible.
Okay, so do we need to address item 2 at all?
You might just want to say, I can give you an update. The applicant, the item will have to be withdrawn because they did not properly complete their public notification. They had a typo on the letter that they sent to the public as far as the time.
Oof. Oh, that hurts. Okay.
So we'll see that at the next meeting.
Great. So we're going to move on to item 3, which is CCP 2022-09, a concurrent plat for submitted by ESI for property located at 3447 North Highway 112. Property zone CS Community Services and contains approximately 24.83 acres. The request is to split the property into 2 lots containing 23.67 and 1.16 acres. And our planner is Mr. Umberger. Ryan, can you have the staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This property is in North Fayetteville. It's west of Highway 112 and approximately 750 feet south of the intersection between Highway 112 and Van Ash. This site covers approximately 24.83 acres. It's zoned CS Community Services, and it is the site of Fellowship Bible Church that was constructed in 2015. The westernmost extents of the property are undeveloped that you can see there, apart from a street that, a street that bisects that western panhandle. There is an unnamed protected stream in part of the Illinois River watershed that follows right where my cursor is running along there where there is a tree line. That portion of the stream runs under the street and connects connects to the Illinois River watershed. There's a planned trail connection to Clabber Creek that runs along Highway 112 that borders on the east side of this property. The sidewalk along this property's frontage has already been constructed as an off-street trail. No portion of this property falls within the Hillside Hilltop Overlay District or within a FEMA floodplain. Hydric soils do cover most of the property.
Ron, do you have control over that, the cursor there? Is that your cursor?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Oh, I have control over one cursor, I think.
Somebody else's cursor is just gonna sit in the middle.
The master one is somewhere over there.
It's just confusing. Okay, great.
Yep.
It's stuck in the middle of Josh's head.
So the request before y'all today is it's a concurrent plat. The applicant intends to subdivide this lot into two, one containing 23.67 acres and one containing 1.16 acres. They have been exhausted
with your cursor.
Sure.
Your active cursor that we can see.
Yeah, and actually.
Because I found where it says tract 1A, but tract 1B is
I think it's
the other tract
now.
but
Let me go ahead and just
see. It's on the back end.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
tract 1B is actually up against Highway 112. So my very small cursor there is kind of tracing, yeah.
Okay.
And then 1A is the rest of the lot connecting to Dean Solomon. So this applicant, they've exceeded the number of administrative lot splits that they're permitted. And so they originally submitted this as a lot split, it is now coming through as a concurrent plat. The overall site has access to City of Fayetteville water and sanitary sewer. The proposed tract 1B has frontage along North Highway 112, which is a regional link street. Typically, those streets require a dedication in the amount of 46 feet from center line of the existing street. There's RDOT right-of-way along Highway 112 that totals 55 feet from center line, so that exceeds the typical requirement. Proposed tract 1A, which again is the remainder of the western extent of the site, that lot has frontage along North Dean Solomon Road. Dean Solomon is a neighborhood link street at this location. Neighborhood link streets typically require right-of-way in the amount of 35.5 feet from center line, and the current right-of-way totals 38.5 feet from center line. So it also exceeds the typical right-of-way dedication requirement. There is a planned residential link street connection that appears on the 2040 master street plan, and it runs through the southwest portion of the site. So maybe the easiest area is this kind of this boundary that they've got indicated there. That's where the planned residential link street connection is, and then it eventually this driveway runs through where that connection currently is. The residential link streets typically require dedication in the amount of 26 feet from center line or 52 feet overall. And currently there's 59 feet of right-of-way that's dedicated, and it overlays that planned connection. So staff is not recommending any additional right-of-way be dedicated with this project. Access to proposed tract 1B is provided from two curb cuts onto North Highway 112 to the east, and access to 1A is provided via an unnamed residential link street connection that intersects with Dean Solomon Road to the west. The drives onto North Highway 112 are separated by roughly 350 feet, so this exceeds the typical 250-foot requirement for regional link streets. We did ask that a note be included on the plat acknowledging that additional access points for that parcel would not be permitted because they would not be able to meet our separation requirements. In terms of street improvements, Highway 112 is constructed with an 11-foot drive lane, open ditches, 32 feet of green space, and a 12-foot off-street trail. Staff is not recommending any additional street improvements are provided. I'll kind of let Melissa Evans get into the tree preservation. Parks is not recommending any Parkland dedication or fees with this project. And we haven't received any public comment on this item. So we are recommending that this concurrent plat be forwarded to the full planning commission, recommending approval with the conditions that are outlined in the staff report. And I can stand for any questions that you've got.
Couple quick ones. When this piece of, when this lot's broken off, what will it be zoned?
So the entirety of the property is zoned CS Community Services.
And that's a form-based zone, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So the expectation is that whatever is developed on this would be, would have a build-to line.
Correct.
And since they don't have any other access from the street, that it would use that piece of property would rely on the two connections that we already have.
Correct.
And that there would be access easements from tract 1A on that property so that they would still be able to use those connections for the church, right?
Sure, there are two access easements that are in place that overlay those existing connections onto Highway 112.
Okay, great. Joe, do you have any questions for Ryan right now?
No.
Andrew, did you have any questions for Ryan right now?
Yes, sir.
Great. So let's move on to urban forestry. Melissa, do you have any comments on this one?
Good morning, again. No, urban forestry recommends it move forward. I don't have many comments. A tree preservation and landscape plan were provided for tract 1A when it was developed, and the same will be required if tract 1B ever develops. Doesn't look like that's necessarily the plan, so everything looks good. Urban forestry recommends it move forward.
Great, thank you, Melissa. Josh, did you have any comments on this one?
I did not have any comments on this one. All the infrastructure's in place. We looked at it just like a lot split.
Thank you. I just get Cheech and Chong vibes from watching him. Okay, that's engineering. Parks doesn't have anything to say, I'm sure. Let's, is there anybody from the public to speak to this item? Online? Anybody? Okay, is the applicant present? Or online? Probably takes a minute.
We have Kyle Davin who's raised his hand.
Hi, this is Kyle Davin with PSI.
Hi, Kyle. Do you have any comments, something you want to add to this?
No, we do not.
Okay, very good. If just hang out, if we have any questions, we'll get back to you.
All right.
Seems pretty straightforward.
I can, if you have anything else, I can go ahead and.
Go for it.
I'll move forward CCP 2022-09 to full planning commission recommending in favor of recommended right-of-way dedication, in favor of recommended street improvements, and all other conditions of approval.
Excellent, I'll second that. And Andrew, you concur?
Only thing I would ask is, Jesse, can this be placed on consent? Just,
It can, yes.
okay. Can we recommend that it be placed on consent?
Yes. We can recommend that. Joe, you concur?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. This body recommends it's placed on consent. Excellent. So we're gonna move on to our next item of business. And that is CCP 2022-010 concurrent plat submitted by Bates and Associates for property located at 3091 West Finger Road. The property is in the Fayetteville planning area and contains approximately 41.59 acres. The request is to split the property into 3 tracts with 19.35, 5.05, and 13.5 acres. And our planner today is Jessie Masters. Ms. Masters, can you have the staff report?
Yes, of course. So the subject property for you on this item, it is in the Fayetteville planning area. It is kind of in between the city limits to the north, and there's some additional city limits to the south. But it is indeed in the Fayetteville planning area and not in the city of Fayetteville limits. It is just north of Kessler Mountain Regional Park. The overall property does contain approximately 37.91 acres. And the request is to split the property into 3 tracts with 19.35, 5.05, and 13.5 acres. It may read as just a typical lot split. They're coming from 1 lot to 3. But in this instance, the parent tract had been subdivided administratively too many times, so it has to be replatted through this process. So with that, it is coming for you today as a concurrent plat rather than just an administrative lot split. As far as water and sewer go, the overall site does have access to the city of Fayetteville water, but is proposed to be served by septic rather than city sewer since it is located outside of the city limits. As far as right-of-way to be dedicated, there was a recent concurrent plat that came through on this property earlier this year that subdivided off this piece of land and from the overall parent tract. And with that, right-of-way was already dedicated along the property's frontage along Finger Road to the amount of 26 feet from street center line. So no additional street right-of-way is being requested to be dedicated at this time since it was already done. For access and connectivity, access to the site is provided along West Finger Road, and the project is meeting their typical overall access and connectivity standards. Each lot does have enough frontage per Washington County zoning standards, so there's no issues there. We are not recommending any street improvements in association with this request. It is very minimal, going from 1 lot to 3, and any street improvements would not meet the rough proportionality or rational nexus standards as set by the city ordinances. Tree preservation is not required outside of the city of Fayetteville, so that's not being evaluated at this time, nor is Parkland Dedication, since there's also, this is located outside of the city of Fayetteville, and neither of those ordinances apply. We did receive some public comment and opposition from a neighbor yesterday regarding the item. The neighbor is concerned about the scale of the proposed development. She has concerns that the city did not have jurisdiction in the area over building permits or grading permits. And expressed issues about how land to the south of the property in question was annexed into the city in 2008. Some of the concerns seemed larger than were necessarily reflective of this specific request. With that, we are recommending that the item be forwarded to the full Planning Commission with a recommendation of approval. This would be eligible to also be placed on consent if the Commission felt it necessary. We are recommending, and also as a condition of approval, Washington County approval would be required prior to their recordation of this. Other than that, I can answer any questions you might have.
Great. Joe, do you have any questions right now? Or Andrew?
Well, just one question. What is that a utility easement going through diagonally?
Yes.
Okay. That was all I had.
Andrew, did you have anything? All good? Is there anybody from the public to speak to this item? Doesn't look like it. Is the applicant present? Hey, now we know why you're here.
Good morning, Justin Reed with Bates and Associates, representing the property owner on this project. And I don't have anything to add at this point. Staff summed everything up very well.
Sounds great. Excellent. We'll bring it back to the commission. This is pretty straightforward. We can't approve this at this level.
But you could place it on the consent agenda.
Okay.
It's a land subdivision, so it has to go to the full commission.
Andrew, you want to hit this one?
Yeah, Lincoln. I move to forward CCP 2022-010 to the full planning commission, recommending in favor of recommended street improvements and all other conditions of approval, and additionally with a recommendation for consent.
Perfect.
I'll second.
We have a second and all concur. Great. Now we're moving along. So our next item, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
The next item is LSD 2022-017, large-scale development south of 5295 West Weddington Drive for NWA Custom Homes, submitted by ESI for property located south of this Weddington Drive. Property zone RIU and contains approximately 1.8 acres. The request is for a residential development with 19 3-family and 4-family units and associated parking. And Gretchen Harrison is our planner. Ms. Harrison. give us our staff report.
So the subject property for this item is located in West Fayetteville on the south side of Weddington Drive, about halfway between North 54th Avenue and North Royals Avenue. The property, as you mentioned, is zoned RAU, Residential Intermediate Urban, and it contains approximately 1.8 acres. As some reference, this is just west of the Weddington West Roxon duplexes that were recently platted, just south of Weddington Drive, and the business park that I believe you recently reviewed is just north of this. Also, the southern extent of the property is located within the riparian corridor and floodplain of Owl Creek, but there is no development proposed within that area. So the applicant for this item is requesting large-scale development approval to develop the property with 1 triplex, 4 quadplexes, and associated parking. The plan shown here is rotated, so north is to the left of the screen. No variances have been requested with this proposal. So just to go over what staff's recommendations are, as far as right-of-way to be dedicated, the property has access to West Geyser Street, just here, which is located in that duplex subdivision to the east. They are proposing to extend that street as part of this development. So staff is recommending that right-of-way be dedicated along that street in line with the residential link street standard, so 52 total feet in width. For street improvements, we are recommending the standard residential link street improvements along that extension of Geyser Street with 6-foot sidewalk and 6-foot green space along each side of the street. For access management and connectivity, staff determined that the project is meeting our standards. Access to the site is proposed with that extension, and parking is concentrated along this private alley, which has already been built out just east of the site. And they do plan to adjust the property line so that all parking is contained within this lot and is not shared between adjacent properties. As far as design standards go, this project is subject to our urban residential design standards since it contains a triplex and some quadplex units. Staff finds the proposal to be compliant with those standards. Pedestrian connectivity is provided throughout the site, and ground floor dwellings adjacent to Geyser Street do have direct access to that street and a principal facade along that side of the building. No building type is utilized more than 3 times within the development, and variation is provided in terms of materials, color, and roof form with bays along each principal facade. For water and sewer, the applicant is proposing to extend an 8-inch water line to provide fire protection and domestic water service for the development. They are also proposing to extend an 8-inch sanitary sewer line to provide sanitary sewer service. As far as Parkland Dedication goes, PRAB reviewed this project on May 2nd of 2022. And at that meeting, they recommended a parks fee in the amount of $18,088 for 19 multifamily units for this project. And those will be due prior to building permit issuance. We did not receive any public comment on this item. We do have a couple minor comments that we believe can be resolved prior to building permit issuance. So we are recommending that this item be approved today by the Subdivision Committee, recommending in favor of our recommended right-of-way dedication and street improvements with conditions outlined in the staff report. But I can stand for any questions that you may have about this project.
Just a quick one, the drawing actually that we're looking at looks like part of it is cut off by a label for the legend, I think, where those are garages, I'm guessing, on the other side, right? On the east side?
So actually what's included with this is everything shown here. Those duplexes are part of a separate development.
Oh, good, okay, all right. Don't care then. And the street, can we go back to the aerial and kind of show us where the street?
Yeah, I was kind of confused on where it was connected to Weddington.
Or maybe not the arrow, maybe it's the one that's more
I can share our GIS map.
Helpful
for reference.
Also, these look like kind of old pictures because I think some of this has been developed already.
Property to the east has some streets and infrastructure.
Yeah, and we can't really see that. I see there's for the area drawing where it says RMF 6, there's a street that runs through that. Is that the one that keeps on going straight to this property?
I don't think so. My understanding was it was Geyer that was the connection to this property. This property doesn't appear to connect to Weddington.
Exactly. Commissioner Brink is right. So the property's cut off from Weddington.
I see.
Is Geyer north-south? Oh, yeah, okay.
No, Geyer's that little
Crater.
east-wester, okay.
I was, yeah, okay, I see now.
So you got, Geyser.
Geyser.
So you've got, the street running north-south is Crater Avenue, and Geyser is a little, just stubs out. Is that planned to be a full street running east-west?
Yes.
Okay.
My question for now is, and I didn't see this, is there any plan for maybe a stub out that could potentially connect to Clevenger? Or is that a reasonable assumption that that would ever be connected? It seems that that property in between what I'll call Clevenger and the subject property has potential that it could be expanded.
Yeah, Clevenger Drive is actually a private street, so we wouldn't require a connection to it, and the applicant isn't proposing one right now. That north-south street shown on there is a private alley, so it wouldn't be extended as a public street. And it looks like the applicant, Blake Murray, has his hand raised, and he might be able to speak to that a little more.
Great. Is there anybody from the public to speak to this item? No? Online? Anybody? Mr. Murray, are you there?
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning. Why don't you fill us in on anything, I guess we have some connectivity questions on what's possible and what's expected.
Yes, sir. As was noted by staff, the Geyser Street's gonna extend from, what was just previously final platted Roxton duplexes, from the east of this project to our western property line. Now, I have laid out the parcel adjacent to this. My client doesn't have it under contract or anything like that yet, but he was originally hoping to buy the entire thing from him and then only ended up buying a sliver. When I did, I was able to lay out Geyser to where it made sense and tie it into Clevenger. Even though that is a private street, we thought that the additional connectivity was really needed.
So you're talking about this property owner is attempting to purchase the property to the west, or two parcels to the west?
He originally attempted to purchase it, and then he only settled for this 5 or 10 acres that we have here before us. I think, he would like to eventually get that one day maybe, but I don't think he has it under contract or anything like that right now. I just laid out the entire property originally to see, hey, if we connected to Clevenger, what would this look like, and it worked pretty well.
Okay, great. Was there anything else you wanted to add to the question?
No, I'm happy to try to answer any questions y'all have. I agree with the staff report, everything. I don't ask for variances or anything like that anymore. We're trying to be in line with staff as much as possible with all of our designs and everything. So happy to answer any questions y'all have.
Okay, great. Well, we'll get back to you if we do. So we'll bring this back to the commission. I guess, Commissioner Brink?
Unless you had a question first, I did have a question for the applicant.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was looking at I guess this is this preliminary site plan, I guess. So, when you had mentioned, I believe, let me get back to the page.
Is that page 103?
So there's no, I guess I was getting confused between Geyser and Clevenger, so there is no potential that it could be connected to Clevenger, even with the parcel in between. Is that correct?
Well, I think.
There's no. Oh, God, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Blake. You got it.
There's no connection to Clevenger with this portion of the development, with this development that we're doing. Now, there are 1 or 2 additional parcels to the west of here. And when I laid it out, it was feasible to connect Geyser Street to Clevenger, but it's obviously not proposed with our current development.
Right. Okay. So I guess conceptually, so Geyser would basically run further west, and then you'd have a north-south street, and then maybe a west abutment to connect to Clevenger. Was that conceptually maybe that would look?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay. Cool. that alleviates, my question. Thanks.
Okay. Joe, do you have any questions?
No, do not.
Okay. So there's 3 buildings that have 4 units and 1 building that has 3 units. But there's not more than 3 units there are 3 buildings that look exactly the same. Which of these is not like the other?
So they all have variations in roof form and location of materials and things like that. The 2 closest to the street are kind of mirror images of each other, but there is some variation there.
Okay. Great. So if all of our urban design standards are settled did we have any comments from engineering on this one?
Yes, I had just a few comments on this one, just kind of a information blurb. Ms. Harrison did mention water and sewer. They are extending 8-inch mains. As far as natural features go, if you look at that, look at the aerial imagery that was in the presentation, the southern portion of this property kind of lies in a special flood hazard area, so 100-year floodplain and floodway. And it looks like there's some grading that's proposed in that area, and I'm not sure if that was part of this development or part of the development to the east, which came through before the new stormwater ordinance. If it is a part of this development, we'll need a flood study showing that increase in flood heights, flows, and velocities isn't taking place. And then as far as other drainage aspects of this project, it does have to meet the 4 minimum standards in our drainage manual, so water quality, channel protection, and then peak flow mitigation. And they're proposing that with a proprietary device and then a detention pond. So we are recommending approval on this one.
What's a proprietary device?
So it is kind of like a vortex separator. You've got an inlet and it spins around in a barrel, and then you've got an outlet. And it catches total suspended solids, TSS, trash, oil, and debris. So it's one that we've approved in the past. We've got a bunch of studies on that show that it works. So I can't remember if this one's going to be an aquasporal or a contact unit, but they're both approved.
I see. Good. That was a strange name for it. Blake, did you have any comments on the grading in the flood zone?
Yes, sir. That was from the project to the east of us, so we're not proposing any grading in the flood zone with this project.
Okay, great. And you're aware that the rules have changed?
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, it makes things a little more difficult, but because of that, we're just avoiding the floodplain entirely.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir. Any other questions from commission? Shall we do the thing?
Yeah, I think I'll move to approve forward. Am I looking at the wrong thing now?
Maybe, you can do it on.
To forward LSD 2022-017, large scale development to the Plan Commission approval with recommended right-of-way dedication in favor of recommended street improvements and all other conditions recommended by staff.
Perfectly done.
I'll second.
We have a second and all concur. Great.
Is this one that could be on consent agenda possibly?
I personally, I would prefer to have the
full commission look at it.
Without moving to agenda session, I would prefer that the full planning commission just take a look and concur with what we think.
Yeah, it's Blake, it's kind of a big, fairly dense project in a less dense area, and I recognize that it is zoned RIU, but I think it would be best for the full planning commission to have a look at it and at least decide at agenda session what they want to do with it.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Excellent. We're going to move on to our final item of the day. moment we've all been waiting for. That's LSD 2022-021, large-scale development at 1629 North Crossover. Smith House Cluster Development, named after an old house that's been there a long time, developed by Community by Design for property located at 1629 North Crossover Road. The property is zoned RSF4 and contains approximately 1.93 acres. The request is for development of a cluster housing development containing 15 new single-family residential units. And our planner today is Ryan Umberger. Mr. Umberger, can we have the staff report?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. This subject property is situated on the west side of North Crossover Road, about 1/3 mile south of the intersection of Crossover and Mission Boulevard. The site totals approximately 1.93 acres and it is zoned RSF4, residential single family 4 units per acre. This property is the site of the Peter Smith House. It's a residence that's listed in the National Register of Historic Places. On January 10th of this year, a conditional use permit was approved for a 15-unit cluster housing development on the subject property. And then as you can see, the surrounding uses are primarily single-family residences. And then immediately to the east is a neighborhood recreation site with the pool and tennis courts. I think I said east, I meant west. The applicant is requesting large-scale development approval to develop the property with a cluster housing development that has 15 single-family units. 3 planning commission variance requests were included with the proposed development, and a 4th was received. The 4th variance was for parking lot construction standards. That is a request to use gravel without an engineered grid stabilizer as a paving material. This request, however, requires an administrative engineering determination to evaluate if those areas can be considered permeable paving before the planning commission could decide on the variance request itself. So we did not make a recommendation on that variance request at this time, just pending that engineering determination to be made. The other 3 variance requests were analyzed and are included in a section where we get into sort of the design standards on this. So first and foremost, the subject property has frontage along North Crossover Road. That's a regional link street, and the current right-of-way varies, but at a minimum is slightly over 52 feet from center line. Typically, regional link streets require right-of-way dedication in the amount of 46 feet from center line, and so they are exceeding the typical requirement for right-of-way dedication, and we are not recommending any additional right-of-way dedication occur. In terms of street improvements, Crossover Road is a regional link street. It's the only public street that this property has frontage onto. It has a 59-foot paved width, 4-foot sidewalks, 2 foot of green space, and curb and gutter. Staff is recommending street improvements, including construction of a 10-foot off-street trail, 8-foot green space, and streetlights at intervals no greater than 300 feet, and street trees. The applicant does provide those on the site plan as well. In terms of access management and connectivity, staff has determined that the project meets our access and connectivity requirements. Access is provided via a 20-foot wide driveway onto Crossover Road, and the curb cut for this driveway is separated by over 250 feet from adjoining driveways, so that exceeds the minimum requirement for a regional link street as well. In terms of the design standards, we find that the development is required to meet the design standards that are outlined in the section of the Unified Development Code that applies to cluster housing developments. That's chapter 164.22. The provided elevations show that each house is going to be developed with a unique structure that vary in terms of the exterior finishes, floor plans and areas, porch orientation and or roof shape. Though the proposal also meets requirements for density, bulk and area, and setbacks in building variety that's established in that section of code. And we do find that the development is only partially compliant with certain design standards that are outlined, and variances have been requested to those standards. So the first one that is listed there is the variance to building orientation. There was another variance that was submitted for pedestrian connectivity. And in the applicant's request letter, they suggest that the requested variances will facilitate the development of a shared vehicular and pedestrian circulation system that is similar to a VUNERV. According to the applicant, the design is intentionally going to create a space that's shared among pedestrians, bicyclists, motor vehicles in a way that gives priority to pedestrians. The applicant also submitted some just background information on VUNERVs and their applicability into residential areas. So taking these variances one at a time, a minimum, the first variance is to 166.22 G2. That is for building orientation. So this is a requirement that a minimum of 75% of dwelling units in a cluster housing development shall be oriented around and face a common open space, a trail, or towards the street. Having pedestrian access to the common open space or street is required. So if I can just back up to the site plan, the applicant states that the shared circulation system has been designed in a form and function to be a shared street. So it's not intended to resemble a parking lot, and they assert that 100% of the houses are front oriented onto either the shared circulation space or North Crossover Road. Staff is supportive of this variance request. Despite there being an intervening drive lane, so I guess I can kind of, hopefully you'll be able to see my mouse, but highlight the areas where they are asserting basically that these units have 100% fronting onto either the circulation system or green spaces or public street. So lot 6 directly fronts on the green space that is occupied by the Peter Smith house. Lot 1 fronts onto Crossover Road, and then each of these other units front onto this shared circulation system that runs throughout the site. So we are supportive of the variance request, finding that this intervening drive lane, despite that being in place, the intent of the cluster housing ordinance is being met with this VUNERV concept, where the internal circulation system is intended to function as an extension of the common open green space that's in the center of the site. 13 of the units are proposed to be oriented towards that circulation system. And staff finds that this will contribute towards the type of placemaking that the common open spaces are meant to create. The other 2 lots, 1 and 6, front onto Crossover and the green space around the Peter Smith house respectively. A stated purpose of the cluster housing ordinance is to encourage innovation and variety in housing, which staff finds the variance request serves to accomplish, and accordingly staff is supportive of this variance request. The next variance that was requested is for pedestrian connectivity. So this is a requirement that all buildings and common spaces are served by a pedestrian circulation system that connects to an existing or planned sidewalk or trail system. The applicant is requesting a variance to allow for the shared space for vehicles, pedestrian, bicyclists, in lieu of the typical pedestrian circulation system. In the request letter, they say that the reason behind this design choice is to slow internal vehicular traffic and expand that non-traditional common open space. Staff is also supportive of this variance request. We agree that the shared circulation system will meet the spirit of the ordinance by providing connectivity throughout the site. It also encourages the use of common areas by future residents. We agree with an assertion that the orientation of the structures is conducive towards encouraging social interaction. It's placing front doors and porches facing onto that circulation system. which staff finds is in line with the goals of the system that they're proposing. So we are supportive of that variance request as well. The standards for parking are also partially being met. So variance request to 17202B, parking lot construction standards, and 17204E, the parking lot design standards, were also submitted. We did find that adequate parking is provided on site. So units that exceed 1,000 square feet in gross floor area allow parking to be provided either at a rate of 1 space per bedroom or 2 spaces per unit. The applicant has the choice as far as which of those options they wanna elect to take for cluster housing developments. And in this instance, the applicant is elected to provide parking at a rate of 1 space per bedroom. So that is a higher requirement. There's 15 units, so 2 spaces per dwelling unit would require 30 spaces. In this case, 1 space per bedroom is requiring 45 vehicle spaces. On the site plan, 22 spaces are located in private garages and 23 are located in the shared driveway. This is a parking exhibit that the applicant submitted that appears in your staff report. So just taking these variance requests one at a time again. The first one is to our parking lot construction standards. This is a requirement that parking lots are asphalt, semi-permeable soil pavers, or concrete, and that they're graded and drained to dispose of surface water into appropriate structures. The applicant is requesting to construct portions of the parking lot circulation area with gravel and no engineered grid stabilizer. So staff does not have a recommendation on this requested variance at this time. The request requires an engineering determination to evaluate the proposed surfacing material. And if that surfacing could be considered a semi-permeable soil paver. In this case, I believe engineering, and I'll let Josh correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe engineering did issue that determination, but just with the amount of time that we had between getting that recommendation and compiling the reports, we were not able to evaluate a variance request accordingly. So we don't have a recommendation on this specific variance at this time. The last variance that has been requested is for our parking lot design standards. So this is a requirement that drive aisles are required to be 12 feet wide for one-way and 24 feet wide for two-way drive aisles. The applicant is proposing drive aisles with 20.5-foot widths. So staff supports this variance request as well. We find this as sort of a link to the prior two variance requests in the sense that it is, the intent behind it is for this internal pedestrian and vehicular circulation system. We agree that the requested aisle widths are complementary to that circulation system. The requested aisle width appears to sufficiently accommodate ingress and egress while providing adequate space for pedestrians. We do have some concern that remains about maneuvering in specific areas that are indicated on the original site plan. So some of the parking spaces that are shown on this exhibit don't necessarily exactly align with the exact location of striping that was submitted with the site plan that we had to evaluate from the materials deadline. So this exhibit did give us relieve some of those concerns, but just wanted to acknowledge that some of the maneuvering issues that we noticed were in these areas that dead end as the property or as the development stubs out towards other properties, and just those vehicles being able to go into those parking and unparking occurring in those spaces. Based on this analysis, we do find that there's sufficient space to accommodate those 45 vehicle spaces. And so we just want to acknowledge that it does appear that there's enough space to accommodate the parking. It's just a matter of I suppose showing exactly where those spaces are going to occur and be able to allow vehicles to park and unpark appropriately. We did also want to acknowledge that the applicant can consider alternative options such as providing compact spaces. So this would allow up to 35% of the overall parking areas to have lesser dimensions. They could utilize administrative reductions for added bike racks and motorcycle and scooter spaces, which would reduce overall parking by up to 10% for each of those if they were to max those out. And they can opt to provide parking at a per unit rate, which would require 30 overall spaces. So staff is recommending approval of this variance as well, with an added condition that if the properties were to be split off onto individual lots, that each resultant lot would need to provide sufficient parking, or they would need to submit a shared parking agreement for those common areas. So those were the primary issues that we had. Did want to acknowledge that there were some remaining plat comments, and we just wanted to make sure that those get shored up as this one moves forward, just so that there's not additional variances or anything that would be needed further on down the line. Beyond that, the applicant is intending to extend water and sanitary sewer throughout the development. And this proposal was discussed by PRAB at their March 7th meeting. And PRAB recommended fee in lieu in the amount of $16,335 based on the 15 unit count. We have not received any public comment on this item. We are recommending that it be forwarded to the full planning commission, subject to the conditions that are outlined in your staff report. And I can stand for any questions that you have on this one.
Great, thank you. Joe, do you have any questions? Right. Andrew, any questions straight off or?
I will, but not yet.
Excellent. Let's move on to engineering. Josh, you got comments on this one?
I do, yes. Water and sewer is being extended through the property, 8-inch mains for domestic service. As far as drainage, we're looking at 4 minimum standards from the drainage manual: water quality, channel protection, peak flow mitigation. For the most part, it looks like water quality is being taken care of with permeable pavement and bioretention. For channel protection, all of the study points that the applicant has pointed out have less than 1 cubic foot of per second of flow, so channel protection, that minimum standard is met. And then for the peak flow, I guess the requirement for that is being met with those reservoir layers for the permeable pavement and some underground detention that's proposed as well. As far as the plans comment goes, we do need some additional information prior to grading permit submittal for meter locations, any wall that's over 48 inches tall, and then some more information on the bioretention design and functionality. I do want to point out that engineering determination for the surface parking. So areas of the parking and drive lanes that are to be used as a design permeable pavement system or account for a pervious surface must have a mat or other confining device covering the surface area of the design system to hold the gravel in place and to provide additional structural support. This is kind of an outline requirement in the drainage criteria manual. I included some exhibits from our manual that goes into that. With the amount of traffic and the turning movements, it's going to be a part of this development. We built this plastic ring or grid paver. It kind of looks like a honeycomb style mat to hold the gravel in place as needed, especially for the lifetime of the parking of that area. So I can answer any questions on that, but that's our determination. And like I said, any questions that you might have, I can do my best to answer them.
Andrew, Joe, did you have any questions for Josh right now?
Well, yeah, the semi-permeable grid, is that something that other projects have used in the past? I haven't really seen that before personally.
Yeah, typically so we've got a couple of options for permeable pavement. We've got permeable pavers, so they're interlocking grid pavers, kind of like bricks. We've got permeable asphalt and permeable concrete. All the projects that I've worked on, we've looked at requiring this grid paver system. So it's basically a piece of plastic, has circles on top, and so some of the gravel goes in the circle and some of it is between the circles, and it just provides that additional structural support so that load is distributed over the mat.
Okay, and then there's pavers on top of that then, is that how it works?
Yeah, I might, if I can share my screen, I think I might be able to. I'll show you what it kind of looks like. Is that coming through?
Can you zoom in just a little more?
I can.
Okay, so it's either a plastering or paver, that's, I think was.
Correct. So the applicant is proposing just a gravel pay or just a layer of gravel. And this would be on top of the reservoir layer. And then your gravel would go around those little circles and also could potentially go in between them.
Okay, and then that was the first part. The second part was then how would they be able to mark spaces with that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
To mark to mark off spaces where people can't park so there can be proper circulation.
I got you. Yeah, that would be up to the applicant. The way that we kind of looked at this was basically just what the surface would look like and how it would function. And so as far as marking or painting, striping, I'd leave it up to the applicant to discuss that.
Thank you.
Andrew, did you have any follow-up questions there?
No, I want to wait to hear from the applicant for my questions.
Good deal. Let's move on to Ms. Evans. You have any comments on this one?
Yes, a few. So the existing tree canopy that's required for this zoning is 25%. The canopy they have on site is currently 27.1%. They are preserving 2.2% and removing 24.9%, which requires 80 mitigation trees. They're planning to plant 73 mitigation trees on site and possibly put the other 7 trees in escrow if they can't find places on site to plant them. I have just a few drafting comments for them and other things they need to clarify. One thing that needs to be mentioned that I did not include in my notes, but I want the applicant to be aware is that tree preservation easements are required for LSD projects, so they'll need to provide that where they can for existing trees. And let's see what else. That otherwise it's just minor comments, and Urban Forestry recommends to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Any other departments we should be calling on? Fire, are we okay with that?
Fire, if you'd like.
Is Captain Wood available? Captain Wood, are you
He's no longer available.
Okay. I wouldn't imagine if he had comments, he'd probably still be here because he was there a few minutes ago. Okay, great. I just want to get to the public comment. Is there anybody from the public who wants to speak to this? Okay, see none. Nobody online? We're going to close public comment and bring it back to the applicant. You know what most of the questions are, right? You must have had a nice meeting with the neighborhood because they're not here.
The property owners did. I was not involved in those meetings. But I'm Brian Teague with Community by Design. I'm representing the property owners. Leslie Belden and Randy Werner are here this morning. We're excited about these houses. We've been designing them using Ozark vernacular, massing and details. We're also excited about the spaces between the houses, between the buildings that we're creating, the shared street, the central green, the private courtyards. And I think a lot of the variances that were required are in regards to those spaces, obviously. I think I really appreciate Ryan covering all of that. I would have not enjoyed having to present all of that information. I did have just a couple questions, comments on the I guess it's the parking lot construction standards variance. Essentially, that would be a variance to allow us to use gravel paving, which gravel paving is an option for permeable paving, but the plastic matting is required in that cross-section that you find in the drainage criteria manual. In the past, we've probably, I think we've built 6 of these permeable pavement systems now over the last 4 or 5 years. In the past, we've asked the engineering department for variances to let us attempt to use a gravel permeable paving that doesn't have the plastic mat in it. We've sourced a different kind of gravel. It's a really fine 3/8 inch crushed gravel. We can get it down from Arcola and Van Buren. It's not limestone. It's crushed river rock, really fine. And so right. After some time, it compacts a lot better than most gravel that you would see around town. We got a variance to kind of do a case study. I think Mr. Granderson was the engineer at the time, and that case study's been built for a couple of years now. I'm able to keep a very close eye on it, so I'm very familiar with it. We really haven't had any issues. We've been surprised about how smooth the gravel compacts itself. On other projects, we have used the plastic mat, and it works also. Sometimes it can become a bit of a nuisance if the mat it starts to work its way to the top. And if it's a trash truck on it or a fire truck, eventually we'll just have to cut it out and throw it away. For these areas where we're not going to have a fire truck or we're not going to have a trash truck on it, I think it's appropriate as long as we make sure that it's flat. It's not on it's 2% or less. I think it will function properly. We asked on another project to remove the mat at grading permit, and I think the engineering department kicked it back to us and said, well, you have to get a planning commission variance if you want us to consider that. And so just to avoid that circle, we went ahead and made the request of the planning commission.
And that's what your request is to build the parking areas, all of the parking areas without the mat, and use the gravel that you're playing with.
Not all of them, just so we could identify certain areas that don't see a lot of traffic, and like a particular parking space or something like that. The main drive through, we're proposing it to be permeable asphalt, so it would be more stable. So it's kind of more of the minor areas
parking.
Okay.
Sorry to
No, this,
delve into that detail so far.
you can hit on all the variances if you want.
I think we've talked about the other variances. It has been, it's been, time consuming, working through all of these, different details. Just if they're, I think if staff was okay with it and, there's not any public comment, and of course the commissioners are okay with it, it would be a little bit of a time bump if the subdivision committee, could approve this and not have to wait to go to planning commission. So I'm just throwing that out there. But with that, I think that's about all that I wanted to say.
Okay.
Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Leslie, did you wanna? You're here.
No, I am just here to listen to Brian and to get to see the faces that I love and see the new faces that are on the planning commission. I was on the planning commission last year. But excited to do this with the Smith House because that was a piece of property that the planning commission worried with for years. And I'm excited that we can complement that historic structure with these vernacular buildings and the trying to have as much of the site permeable as possible and be good neighbors to the people who didn't want anything there to begin with. So.
Yeah. So what's the plans for the Smith House?
It is going to be like a piece of property that the other homes can use. So.
And
it'll be restored and it'll be beautiful and it'll, it'll be nice. And the green space around it.
When you say it's a property that other homeowners can use, is that like a clubhouse of sorts? Is that what you mean by that?
It's kind of like that, and we've had to work with the city on what's allowed and what's not allowed concerning parking, and it's mostly so that if they wanted to have a picnic, a dinner over there, it's not so that they would have a wedding reception and bring in a whole bunch of people. It's just for the personal use of the residents of that community.
Okay, great. I had those questions at Parks Board, and I think it's good to kind of get a conceptual design.
The homes are very small, and so this is additional, space for them.
Enclosed, heated and cooled? Or?
Oh yeah, bathrooms, yep, meeting all those.
Okay.
Brian can tell you all about that. Making sure that we do all the bathrooms just right, so.
And how did you alleviate the concerns of the neighbors for using their pool?
We're not using their pool.
Okay, great.
No.
That may come as a discussion later.
Yeah.
All right.
I think we've just been open and transparent with them, and we sat down with them and answered their questions.
We're making sure that there's not runoff. We're not gonna have fire engines go through their property. We're not gonna have it so dense, and the properties are gonna be of a value that complements their property, so they were happy with that.
And it really helped when we took the commercial aspect out of what
no
previous
commercial
developers had wanted to design, and a lot of parking lots and just a different type of use. So when we kind of stepped that back, that was a big break, I think, for a lot of them.
I think that these are scaled down to their single story, right? Yeah, that was.
It's 1.5 something.
Yeah. Some of the concerns before were like people looking backyards and stuff like that.
Well, and originally, there were ideas that the Smith House might be a coffee shop or something like that, and have commercial use, and we took that out. So.
Very nice. Okay, great. Let's see, gun public.
Mr. Chair, if I could just acknowledge, I heard two things that I did just want to address. So the first is that timeline, so as far as what this body is going to be able to make a determination on. So since there are variances requested with it, it does have to go to the full planning commission for a determination on those variances. And then the other thing I did just want to acknowledge and to Ms. Belden's point was about the Smith House. So there was a condition that was added at the conditional use permit stage for this, and that was that the historic house would be preserved and remain for non-residential public use for those tenants, so.
Okay. Nobody can live in it.
Correct.
You can't Airbnb it out. And you can't
We
have
also can't do
events
big events.
for
I mean, it's
other
gotta be.
other people, right? There could be events for the people that live there, not for general public. Okay. Well, it seems like that would allay a lot of concerns.
Yeah, the cluster housing ordinance does allow for like community buildings to be integrated with cluster housing developments, so I anticipate that's probably how it will intend to function.
And so the parking lot design variance, it sounds like Mr. Teague's talking about having that variance for the locations that it's needed, and that those locations might still be under consideration, and is staff comfortable with that?
Sorry, I don't know if I heard your specific question, but I want to make sure I address it.
Yeah, okay, he's saying that in some areas he's planning on using permeable pavement.
Mm-hmm.
Some areas using pavement with the plastic grid, and some areas without the plastic, gravel without the plastic grid. And so this isn't like, he's getting the variance so that he has the options. And am I addressing that right?
I think that's right. I think basically what we would request from the planning commission is that we could do paving without the plastic, gravel paving without the plastic matting if the engineering department concurred.
Okay, so it's in conjunction with concurrence from engineering.
Ultimately, yeah, because I think it would be a different variance, if you will, if we were going to vary from what engineering thought was being recommended from the drainage criteria manual.
Okay. Josh, are you comfortable with that that language?
Yeah, I think we might just need to have a little bit more coordination with Mr. Teague and kind of iron out what exactly they're requesting and what areas that they're requesting it in. I think our position right now is that we have the standard in the drainage manual that calls out those plastic grids to confine that gravel. I think that would be our stance right now. Like I said, we get more information on where proposed or not proposed, and things like that. It could be something that we might be comfortable with, and if not, it would obviously we'd have to make that determination, and then if the applicant isn't comfortable with that, determination would be appealed to the planning commission. So that's the process that we're in right now.
Okay, well, it sounds like we're following the process then. Excellent.
We can provide more information. The site plan is just so much going on, so I can try to help provide more diagrams to kind of clarify what we are proposing.
I think between you and Josh, you can work that out. But as far as planning commission goes, you need this variance simply so that you can move forward on that process.
I think so. I would have to talk to Josh about that to be perfectly honest with you. But maybe we can do that before the planning commission meeting.
Get that sorted out, just so that we don't have that question of like what are we doing this? Because you know how planning commission would be about variances. Hold on just a second. Commissioner Bell. Pass Commissioner Bell. Okay, Andrew?
Yeah, so Mr. Teague or Ms. Belden, I had two questions. One of them, I believe, approved a variance to, some changes to a sidewalk in another project that was similar, but on the west side. Do you intend to have the same, type of sidewalks that was previously approved on the other project in this project? I hope that question's clear. I think it was off of Farmington Road maybe, and essentially I think you were narrowing the sidewalks.
Oh,
This one is really a quite different. It's kind of a lesser traveled shared space that actually would not have a specified concrete sidewalk for the pedestrians to use. The proposal is for the vehicles and the pedestrians to share a space.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question, we've talked about gravel, love the gravel, permeable, whatever. I would ask, you mentioned that there were other projects that you had done where you did not include the plastic underlayment. Can you tell me which those are that maybe I could go check those out to consider, hey, I guess my question would be, can I see a project with the plastic underlayment and then one without the plastic underlayment?
Yes, we have the project without it is at 132 and 144 North Washington in the back.
I'm assuming that's a private residence maybe?
It's two apartment buildings, but it's perfectly fine if people go back and walk around.
And that's the one without, you said?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
You did it at Monterey, yeah, okay. And then we did the grid quite a while ago at the Monterey apartment building on Lafayette.
615 West Lafayette.
Yeah, I'm gonna go drive by and wanna visualize.
We also did the grid at 1350 West Cleveland. Pretty good looking example right now.
And you said the West Cleveland was years ago?
Monterey
was like 2009.
Gosh.
Yeah, so it's
13 years ago.
Okay, so that gives me an idea of kind of the longevity. I can understand conceptually how an underlayment would kind of buckle and create an issue. I am interested in the, no underlayment. If it compacts down, it sounds reasonable. I just like to put eyes on it.
It's all of these details are considerably expensive, and the plastic matting is, one, it's not a natural material, but two, it's probably half the cost.
Yeah, I can completely understand that. That's why, in my opinion, if you're not adding plastic that could potentially tear or something become, for all intents, litter, I generally like that. So, anyways, thank you. That answers both my questions.
Thank you.
Great. Maybe Joe's having a baby, I don't know. So I don't think I have any more questions, so let's see. I think I'll move forward LSD 2022-021 to the full planning commission, subject to the following conditions. Recommended subdivision recommendation of right-of-way dedication, finding in favor of that. Finding in favor of subdivision committee's recommendation for street improvements, and finding in favor of the variance to UDC 166 2.22G2 regarding building orientation, finding in favor of the variance to UDC 166.22G8 regarding pedestrian connectivity, finding in favor of the recommendation for variance for UDC's 172.02B parking lot construction standards, and finding in favor of variance to UDC 172.04E parking lot design standards. And all conditions of the existing conditional use permit.
And Mr. Chair, I just had one question of clarification. So on the variance to the parking lot construction standards, that's the 5th condition of approval in the report. Was that the staff recommendation is that the variance is forwarded without a recommendation, and I just wasn't quite sure what I heard. If you had said recommending approval, or if you wanted to recommend it without a.
We can recommend without we can forward without a recommendation, and you guys can sort some things out beforehand that I'm sure would answer those questions.
I'll second that.
Excellent, and so that's all we need. This meeting's adjourned. Is there any announcements?
No, not today.
Very good. Thanks, everybody.